So, what qualifies me to stand up in front of a bunch of people and profess to know lots about LinkedIn? I'm head of the digital team at Fusion. Fusion is a company, I think we've got about 26 of us in the company. My team is 7. And what Fusion is trying to do is it's trying to offer services to fast growth companies. So if you imagine a fast growth company, they're going to need a whole bunch of services as they grow, and Fusion tries to offer those. So we have accountancy services, we have law services, we have consultancy services, and my bit is the digital service. We also do tax. And Fusion will grow over time to offer some of the other services that we're not yet offering, but I don't care about that because I'm only interested in digital. And so what my digital team does is it helps people with LinkedIn. And so what makes me qualified to talk about LinkedIn is that whilst you might do a few posts a month on LinkedIn, my team do about 50,000 connection requests a month. So we know what a connection request looks like. So that's why I'm here to talk. Other places you might have come across me is I'm a resident speaker at the Lead Gen Academy. So Lead Gen Academy is actually happening tomorrow in Farnborough. So anybody here who is not a regular is welcome to come along and be a guest and come along. I think tomorrow we're talking about instead of leaving all of your planning of your marketing to next year or December or something or other, you should be doing it in advance. And so the whole of tomorrow's session is all going to be about planning your marketing for 2020. So anybody that fancies getting their head into that, come along tomorrow. LinkedIn. There are at least 5 different approaches to generating leads on LinkedIn, and it's your goal to try and work out which combination you might use within your business. I would suggest that you want to do at least 1 or 2 of these things. As with most marketing, consistency is key. So I think it's much better to do one thing well and consistently within your business than try to grab all 5 of these things and do them all at once, starting from next week. Because if you do that, you'll fail. It's a hell of a lot of work. And you know, my view on marketing is that whilst you have the concept of a marketing budget, things shouldn't be done really in that way. It's a necessity of a small business that you can't just throw all the cash in the world at marketing. But you need to try and find one thing that works and creates a positive return to your business, because then you can use a little bit of that positive return to try another thing that works. And it's much better to take this sort of slow and steady approach, putting in place repeatable, reliable steps within your process, than it is to just throw bits and bobs at whatever the next trend is. You'll find that you aren't measuring it properly, you're not giving it 100% commitment, it won't work for you, and you'll give it up because it doesn't work. When in actual fact it might have worked if you had taken a slower and more methodical approach. So the 5 things that we're talking about, the first is networking. So you're all aware that you can talk to people on LinkedIn. So when you log into LinkedIn, you get your news feed, and they're generally people that you might have heard of and you might have connected to. There will be people in your feed that you haven't heard of and that don't know you from Adam, and we'll see why that is a bit later on. But these people you can engage with. So, Rob often puts information about stuff that he's doing onto his feed, and it often pops up into my feed. And occasionally I'll comment and say, well done, Rob, or something or other. That is networking, but it's networking with real people. Me and Rob know each other from the Lead Gen Academy, but we're networking in an online way. But there are people that I network with on LinkedIn that I have never met. I assume they're real people. They don't have to be real people. Interestingly, in our company Fusion, we have a member of staff that doesn't exist. And he gets regular requests for connections and chats and invites to things, and it doesn't exist. It's not a real thing. Sometimes you need these things in a larger company so that multiple people can all log into the same account and do things, and so it's a useful thing to have. But yes, so networking in an online way, it's much harder to fake a fake profile than it is to just be yourself. It's hard to be genuine when you're trying to second guess what you would think. So I don't advise it. I think you should just be yourself. Obviously the best version of yourself that you can be. So networking, there's your news feed, and your news feed will generally be a curated feed of things that you're vaguely interested in and people that you vaguely know. There are also groups on LinkedIn, and groups, LinkedIn groups were actually a predecessor of Facebook groups. They were very, very popular for a while. Then they got overly spammed and the interface wasn't great, and a lot of the groups moved to Facebook. And so these days your mileage with groups will vary. Some groups will be very active and very interesting and full of lively debate. Other groups will be, like tumbleweed going through them, no action at all. And then others will just be full, because they're not being properly policed, of people trying to sell you stuff. And so with LinkedIn groups, if you like the idea of chatting with other people, you've just got to try a few groups and leave the ones that are rubbish and stay with the ones that are good, and spend some time helping people. Generally, groups, it's the same anyway. You help, you contribute, and over time people will begin to respect you. And once you've earned their respect, sometimes they'll listen to a little bit of promotion. So as long as you don't overdo it. So that's the networking, and that could be a strategy for you. Communicating to your existing connections. So some of you will have quite large bases of existing people that you're already connected to. When have you sent them a message recently? So just in the same way as you might send an email to someone, or you might drop in and say hi at a networking event, you can talk to people. You can let people know, you can send them a direct message. You can also send messages to people who have a premium account and who have got it set to open. These people you're allowed to message. So you can find these people, however you do it, in your news feed. You can find them in your groups, and you can send them messages. So that's a second approach. You could run adverts. Adverts are adverts. I don't really need to say much more about adverts. You see them all over the web. You see them when you're on LinkedIn. They're adverts. So if you think that your business has something to offer that might respond to a particular niche on LinkedIn, so if your target audience, if you can narrow them down and you think that you can communicate to that audience something very quickly, then an advert might be a way to go. If you are in a position where you're communicating something that requires time and effort and understanding, an advert is probably not the way to go, because you only have a split second of somebody's subconscious in order to break through and interrupt what they're actually doing. So adverts are a very easy way of burning money unless you think it through carefully. Sponsored in-mails. So a sponsored in-mail, again, is a paid thing, so you're paying LinkedIn to do this. It's different to an advert in that it appears in the messaging function of LinkedIn. So it's like the LinkedIn equivalent of an email. And the only difference between me and you being connected and me sending you a message, and me and you not being connected and me sending you a message, is one, I have to pay LinkedIn for the privilege, and two, there'll be a little note on it that says sponsored. So the recipient will know that this is an advert. It just doesn't look like an advert. It looks like an email. And the funny thing is about it, that because we've just got these sort of strange inbuilt Pavlov's dogs type responses, where we like our inboxes to be clean and empty, and we like all of our emails to be read, the same goes on LinkedIn. You go onto LinkedIn, you see, oh, I've got outstanding ones that haven't been read, and they sort of stand out like a big bold sore thumb. These things get read, So just because it is a paid communication, you still get very, very high open rates. And the thing about LinkedIn is that the open rates are far higher at the moment than emails. So if any of you have done email marketing, then a typical open rate, unless you've got a very engaged list, might be 20%. Whereas on LinkedIn, your open rate might be 85, 90%. So again, it all depends on what you are offering. Classic marketing, the 3 M's of marketing. Who are you trying to reach? Can you find them on LinkedIn? Can you identify them as a class of people on LinkedIn? what is the message, what's the message that you're going to try and reach them, and then the medium would be this email. So is an email a sufficient communication device in order to get them interested in some way? Now that email doesn't have to be the only thing. The email might include links off to other things, so you might have a whole video about something or other that you're hosting somewhere else. But you have to be able to interrupt them and interest them enough, entice them to click on that link so that they can watch the longer piece of information. And I know that some of you have quite complicated things that you're doing, and actually you have to think through, how do I go from, you know, a very complicated thing to something that's actually very simple and very easy to understand, that gets their interest so that they take more time to look at the complicated stuff. And then the final approach is connecting to new people. And in the LinkedIn perfect world, the way that this works is that I come along to an event like this, I'm invited by one or two people that I already know, I meet some people that I've never met before, we say hello, we exchange our contact details, and then I go to LinkedIn and I connect to you saying, it was lovely to meet you today, let's connect. And that's how LinkedIn wants us to do it. But there's no law that says you have to do it that way. You can just find the person. So I could not bother turning up to here. I could just find out a list of all the people that turned up to here. Probably on Facebook somewhere it will say, I could work out the businesses in this group, and then I could go and find these individuals, all of you, on LinkedIn, and I could write a connection message and say, do you want to connect? And some of you, typically about 20% of you, will just say yes, because you're connection tarts, and you've decided that anybody that connects to you, you just say yes. And it's probably because somebody like Richard Woods, who's also a connection tart, and he won't mind me saying that, he has shown us that actually it's very easy to get lots of connections just by asking. And so we have started to get into our mindset that lots of connections is a good thing on LinkedIn. Now I would argue that lots of connections on their own is not a good thing. It's actually a distraction for you, because you end up with a whole connection base which is probably not your target audience. So if you get 20 connection requests in a month, and all you do is you log in once a month and you say yes, 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 who are those 20 people? You didn't even check. You didn't even check. What we know is that you may well be their prospect, but what we don't know is whether they are your prospect. Whereas if you choose who you go out to, then you can go out to your prospects. Another way I like to think about it is imagine that my target audience, imagine I'm one of us web developer-y type people, and I've managed to put some branding, because I've been told that niching is a really good idea. So I only do websites for accountants. I am the person, if you're an accountant, I do the websites. So I need to now meet a lot of accountants. So I go along to the local BNI, and it turns out there's only one accountant in the room, because they've got this silly rule which means you can only have one accountant in the room. So how many BNIs do I have to go along to in order to meet loads of accountants? Hundreds. But I'm a web developer. There's always a web developer in every BNI. I'm not allowed to go to any BNI that's got another web developer, because somehow we might be getting into fights or something or other. And so actually conventional networking is really useless for me, because I'm trying to meet loads of accountants and I'm not allowed to go to any events. Whereas on LinkedIn, I can do a search and I can find hundreds of thousands of accountants, and I can reach out to them. And suddenly now these accountants who are mindlessly saying yes to me, connect, 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 they're all my prospects. And so my LinkedIn connection base is growing, and it's full of people that I want to sell to. Yeah. And so now, when I'm putting my content out on LinkedIn, instead of it going to a random bunch of people that I've accepted the connections of, it's going to my audience, which means that I can be much more specific about the content that I'm putting out there, because I know they are my audience. I know who they are, I know what they are, and therefore I can predict what they might be interested in. And if I can get that right, so if my audience is, let's say, 2,000 people, and there are random 2,000 people, and I send out something specifically about accountants, what percentage of my 2,000 people are going to be interested?
Very small.
Very few. So my engagement is going to be low. Whereas if that same 2,000 people, 1,800, 200 are friends and family, and then the 1,800 are these people that I've actively sought the connections with. Now if I put something out about my audience, I get very high engagement because it's actually relevant to all of them. So it's an interesting space, this going out and connecting to people. Once you know who you're reaching, you can start to think about a way of reaching out to them that will appeal. So if I reached out to all of you, how would I craft a message to reach out to all of you? It'd be pretty simple, really. I'd just say, it was lovely to see you yesterday. Do you want to connect? And you can see it's personalised because I said that we saw each other yesterday. And that is an example of personalisation. The more personal the message is, the higher the chance that the recipient is going to say, yeah. You know? And so this is when you're crafting your messages, you have to think about how can we take this from a bland blanket message and turn it into something that feels like I wrote it to you, one-to-one. And if I can get that right, then my connection responses are so much higher. And the best way of doing it is going back to the old school LinkedIn approach, meet the people first. That works really well, you know. But if we find that we can't meet the people first, then we have to try and do the next best thing. Basics. Get your profile sorted out. Hands up.
Sorry, can I just intersect here? We do have another talk about LinkedIn profiles. So
Cool. This is only one slide. I'm not going to do it.
the basics, yeah.
Absolute basics. Hands up. Who has got a holiday photograph on LinkedIn? No, you don't have to put your hands up. But I bet you that there's one or two of you in the room, probably one, maybe two, I don't know. But there's always one who's, you can say they're on holiday. They've even got a glass of wine in their hands. They're in a t-shirt. Maybe they haven't got a t-shirt, you know. Is that the right photograph? No. If your husband or wife is in the photograph too, arm round, no. Dog, no. Children, no. I know this is who you are, but stick it on Facebook. Yeah, Facebook's the personal thing. This is a work connection thing. You're going out, you're trying to represent your business, and so you don't want to see what your accountant looks like when your accountant is on holiday in Greece. Yeah, your accountant, we want to see what your accountant looks like when they're at work. Keyword centric. So think about the kind of things that people might search for. I'm not so convinced whether this is an absolutely vital thing for business. You see a lot of people that will say that it is. I'm sure that the person who comes along and talks about their profile will say that it is. For me, it's very important if you want to be found by recruiters, because recruiters will use keyword searches, and you may well want to be found by recruiters. So I'm not dismissing that in any way, but a lot of us don't actually search much on LinkedIn. We more consume rather than actively search. But let's say I was trying to find, imagine I was somebody like head of a big IT program and I needed a particular skill set and I wanted to try and find it. My recruiters were failing to find the right person. I might go to LinkedIn and I might type in some words and I might try and reach out personally to each one of the people that comes back and says, are you doing anything? Could you help me? So if you want to be found, then you've got to build, you know, it doesn't work like magic. You've got to actually put the keywords into your profile. Punchy and interesting headline. Your headline gets put on pretty much everything that you do on LinkedIn. So when you reply to somebody's comment on somebody else's post, your headline will be there. So what do you want it to say? You know, most people's headlines are really dull. So if that's the impression you want to give, it's not a bad impression because it will not give an impression. People will just glaze over, oh, project manager, oh, accountant. It's nothing. So all it is as a marketer, you're missing an opportunity. So if you can inject a bit of humour, you might make someone smile. If someone smiles, they're more inclined to like you. Humour is a lovely thing to do. If you can't do humour, then present what you do in a way that is different to the way that every other person of your type is presenting it. Catch attention. Get them to pause and think, oh, that's interesting. You know, because what you want them to do is look at your profile. You know, and once they look at your profile and look at your face, and you're starting to build the connection. It happens gradually, but it won't happen if they just glaze over and pass over. And just make sure you fill in your LinkedIn. This is back to the LinkedIn algorithm. They give you all these different sections. Most of us don't care about all these different sections, apart from LinkedIn's algorithm does. So fill them in. It's really, really simple. I can't imagine anybody hasn't got all-star status, but if you haven't, get it. LinkedIn gives a guided wizard that you just go through and say, add this, add this, add this. People say, I don't want to put my education on there. Make it up. Put some fake, put something there, you know. Put your nursery school. Nobody's going to mind. But seriously, you've got to fill in the education section. If you don't do it, you won't get all-star status. This is what LinkedIn says. It says people with complete profiles are 40 times more likely to receive opportunities through LinkedIn. Who knows whether that's correct, but that's what LinkedIn is saying. So given that it only takes 10 minutes to do, worth doing. There are some settings hidden away in the settings. Have strong passwords. You know, if somebody hacks your account, you will realise why you should have had a long password, because not only will it be embarrassing to you, but your embarrassment will be spread to every single contact that you've got. So have strong passwords. Long is much more important than complicated. Yeah, computers find, you know, brute force algorithms do not make any differentiation between apostrophes and exclamation marks and normal letters. It just makes no odds to them. So length is the thing that will protect your password. And just to make it quite clear, a word, even a long word like parliament, is effectively a letter. Yeah? So just because you've got one really long word, well, that's just a word. Brute force attack will catch that in one. So you need a nice long password full of lots of different letters. There are some settings. So there's a similar profiles feature. What that does is when you look at somebody's profile, it shows to the right-hand side similar profiles. So imagine they're looking at you. You don't want to put a whole bunch of temptations over on the right-hand side for them to go and look at someone else. So just switch that off. Switch off sharing of connections. Don't allow people to browse all of your connections in order to find out. If I'm a competitor of you, if I'm a competitor, I could browse all of your connections, assume some of your connections are your clients, and then I could go and look at them, and then I could target every single one of your connections. If you've got a nicely niched connection base where I've gone after all the accountants, do I want somebody else who wants to target accountants to be able to look at my connections? No. So switch it off. Disconnect old devices. If you go into the settings, you can see the devices that are currently connected to LinkedIn. Generally, people don't housekeep this stuff. The more devices you have randomly from all sorts of places in the world, the more likely LinkedIn is going to think that there's something funny about this account. So just go in there once in a while and just disconnect all of that old phone that you had that you haven't used for a while, but it's still connected via LinkedIn. So just housekeep your devices, and just do an audit on the information that you're sharing, because you may well be sharing your email address, for example, and yet is it your work email address of your current company, or is it the email address you had when you started your LinkedIn account? Could be either. So just have a little audit of what information you're sharing. I'm all for sharing information. Most people don't, and unfortunately LinkedIn has changed it so that it doesn't share stuff by default. But the reality is we're business people, we want to be found. When somebody connects to us, we've accepted that connection. I want them to get my email address. I just want them to get my work email address and not my personal one. So, posting content. You all know this intuitively. There are various different types of stuff you can post. Text, images, articles are like LinkedIn's version of a blog post. They sort of sit around permanently. And so you can post an article and then you can post that article out to the people on your feed. Videos, shared post, so you can share somebody else's post, and you can actually attach PDFs. So if you had a report that you wanted to share, you could do that now. Avoid external links. LinkedIn wants to keep everybody on LinkedIn, So if you share, here's my link to my brand new website, unfortunately that will get shown to very few people because it's an external link. So what will the reader of that post do? They'll click on that link and they'll go to your website, which is what you want them to do, but LinkedIn, they don't want their users going off LinkedIn.
Yeah, for video, can you drop a YouTube link, or is it better to upload
Interestingly, you can drop a YouTube link, and if you're doing it on an article, unless they've changed it recently, you have to drop a YouTube link because you can't embed it natively. Whereas on a post, you can embed it natively, and it's much better to do so. So wherever possible, upload it, even though you've already got it on YouTube, just upload the same file onto LinkedIn. Same thought process. They would rather play it through their own player than play it through a player that is linking off to a YouTube thing, which we some of us know how to follow that link and actually end up on YouTube instead of on LinkedIn. So wherever possible, absolutely right, upload the files natively. This is what a post looks like, and you can see there are, down the bottom, there are 3 different things that somebody can do to interact with this. They can like it, they can comment on it, and they can share it. Liking and commenting count as engagement for this post. Sharing is effectively creating a new post. So when you are trying to get engagement for your posts, you want to be encouraging people to like and comment, not share. Now sharing, if somebody's got really good reach, you might want to encourage them to share it because it's still your content, but it's going to be getting out based on their reach rather than your reach. So if you want your reach to increase, you want your engagement to increase, and therefore you need to be encouraging liking and commenting. So this is the complicated thing. We sort of knew this intuitively because we've got people that we know who do this, but we didn't really quite understand how it worked. And I went on an event recently where somebody's done a lot of testing into this and they've sort of cracked the code, which is that the posts get shared according to the engagement that you had on yesterday's post, which is quite interesting because it explains why those of us, we've all been told it's a good idea to post every day, but most of us don't get round to it. And so if we're honest, we only do it once a week, or maybe once every 2 weeks, or maybe once every month. How much engagement did you get yesterday? None. 0 engagement. So you're effectively starting from scratch again. And so the way the process works is that you create some content, and then this content is scored based on a number of factors. This is an algorithmic thing, including the amount of engagement you got yesterday. And so then it will get shared out to whoever the algorithm decides to share it to. And if you have no engagement in the past, it will probably share it to a few of your connections. And then it will monitor it and see what engagement you get off this post. So let's say that you have encouraged your connections to like and share it. Once you manage to like it and share it more than 20 times, and 20 is probably not an exact figure, but it's a figure that is roughly the right amount. That's the kind of volume that you're looking for in terms of engagement. It triggers a human editor to look at your post. And that human editor will decide whether that post is actually engaging. And if it gets the thumbs up, then the algorithm will show your post to a wider group than it was currently being shown for. And so you're not going to go from nothing to a viral post that's going to go around the world, but you can go from nothing to something. And then you can go from something to something more. And so what this is really doing is it's actually building a sort of a groundswell of reputation on LinkedIn. And so the interesting thing, because a lot of people have said, well, why don't you just game the system? Why don't you just get a group of people to always like and comment on yours, and maybe you can do the same to theirs? And actually that does work. You know, it does get you to the threshold that you need in order to trigger the human. But the human is the blocker, because if you've put an unengaging post out and artificially boosted it, the human will read it for what it is, which is an unengaging post. And so you can't really game the system. The only thing that you can do is the concept of a content sandwich. You can put out highly engaging content, and that will build this sort of reputation, and then you can put out a piece of more promotional material that will get shared based on the engagement that you got yesterday. And so you can sort of alternate between more stuff that's focused on letting people know what you do and stuff that is just true engagement posts. And if you can take that kind of publishing approach, then you can get your more salesy related content. I mean, I would argue it still needs to be high value and it still needs to be non-salesy in its approach, but it can be content that's directly related to positioning you for what you do. You can sandwich that between highly engaging stuff, generally pictures of dogs that talk and pretty bunnies that jump around the place. They get a lot of engagement. So you can sandwich it between these kind of pieces of content. That will give you better reach. So I hope what you're seeing here is that it's actually quite a challenge to take content posting as a route to market. And it explains why we don't have to feel quite so guilty when we failed. Because I've failed. I mean, anybody in this room not failed at this approach? I mean, it's a hard old approach because it demands of us that we create really engaging content, you know. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing to try to do, but it's tough. So the next thing we're going to talk about is actually reaching out to new people. Because the beauty about reaching out to new people is that it doesn't require yesterday's engagement at all. So what it does require, I mean, you can do it without, but it's much, much easier with, is Sales Navigator. And Sales Navigator costs money. It's 58 quid plus VAT. So depending on whether you're VAT registered, it's 58 quid or it's about 70 quid. And what Sales Navigator allows you to do is it allows you to have a whole series of search criteria that you can fill in order to hone in on your particular target prospects. And so you go through and you set up this search, and then it will go out and find all these people for you, and then it makes it very easy for you to connect to each one of these people with a message. And the initial connection message is limited to 300 characters. But I would argue that whilst most business people are tempted to go over 300 characters, you should be aiming to be much less than 300 characters, because people are so time poor, they will not read more than a sentence. So short and personal is much better than long and even, I don't mean salesy, but professional. You know, a very well-structured professional introduction often doesn't work as well as I see we're connected to the same people, do you fancy connecting? Yeah. You know, and so this is what we're trying to do here. We're trying to find our target audience, find big long lists of target audience, and we're trying to connect to them. Now, this is something that LinkedIn frowns upon, because it's not what LinkedIn wants us to do. They want us to meet all of these people personally first and then do this. But they provide us with a tool, and they charge us £58 a month in order to do this. So it's a grey area. And so will this strategy work in a year's time? I have no idea. Will they start policing this strategy more heavily? I have no idea. You have to make your own decision as to whether this is a strategy that you're comfortable with. So if you're a classic salesperson, you'll say, hell yeah, and you'll get on with it. And if you're somebody who has never been really good at the idea of cold calling, you know, interrupting someone, then this is probably on the edge of it, because we're sending personal messages. But again, the message that you send largely dictates how you come across, and you're in direct control of that. So you can write a message that you're very comfortable with. So there are people that you can connect to who are open And if they have an open connection, then they're basically saying, bring it on. And so if you find people with this little icon there, the little in thing, then they may well be open, and you can connect to them, and you'll find that's that they're saying, talk to me. So you're not going to get your account blocked in any sense for that. But if you're going to try and reach out to lots of people, then there are some limits that you have to deal with. So after 100 connection requests, if you bash out 100 connection requests in a day, you'll start to get a capture thing put on. So you have to type in the letters that LinkedIn display. But I would argue that if you're getting anywhere close to that limit, you're already going too far. Having sent out, as I say, 50-odd thousand a month, our recommendation is more around the 50 mark. Much above that, you start to draw attention to your account, and LinkedIn might put a suspension on your account. And so you then have to pull back a bit, and it's walking a tightrope of getting the level right. What is engagement and what is spamming? You've got to just walk that tightrope carefully. In our experience, if you buy Sales Navigator, you find your account gets blocked less. That's only anecdotal. We've been using this kind of technique for over 4 years, so it is possible, if you don't go silly with it, to do this as a sustainable and repeatable channel within your business. So this is the process. You send out an initial connection request, then we send out a second message when they connect to us, and we give them a final nudge if they don't respond. There are 4 different types of outcome. The first one is that they ignore you, and with a percentage, they will. There are lots of people on LinkedIn who never log into LinkedIn. It's very hard to accept a connection request if you never log in. So there will be people that's it. And you have no mechanism of giving them a nudge, because all you've done is put out a connection request. And so LinkedIn won't allow you to do anything more with that connection until they actually respond. The only thing you can do is withdraw the connection request if you want to. And I recommend sort of housekeeping your connection requests once every couple of months, just to keep it more. They often connect and say no. They often connect and say yes. And then there's a whole bunch in the middle that connect and say nothing. And these are the ones who have logged in and they found 20 outstanding connection requests, and they haven't bothered to read any of them. They've just said yes, 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 yes. And so that's where the second message comes in. The second message, you are not limited by any kind of constraints on length. I think it's 8,000 characters, so you can write a book and publish it there. You should resist the temptation to write a book. Instead, keep it brief, keep it to the point. Just continue a dialogue in the same way as you would on a face-to-face networking. Say what you're interested in and see if the person is interested in what you've got to say. If they are your target audience, then they will be, because you do what they need. So do you see the little quote? I know it's rather small. It says here, "Thanks, Jake. I will accept your invite, but don't need lead generation services as we are drinking from the fire hose on that front." I like that reply. Yeah. So he's basically saying, I'll connect to you, but I'm full. Don't need any lead gen. Now that's a very polite way of saying what sometimes you get very rude responses, and they connect to you in order to tell you that they don't want to connect to you. It's really quite strange. Either way, move on. No point in trying to force yourself upon people that are not interested in you. Far better to spend your time talking to people that are. So crafting an invite message. A potential lead can be lost if you get the invite message wrong. It's not that they aren't open to what you do, it's that they are, like anybody, are skeptical of strangers. So you have to take it gently. And if you don't take it gently, they will spot you for a salesperson. And we all hate salespeople. You called me a salesperson earlier on, didn't you? Yeah. I'm a marketer. Salespeople, I love selling. I think selling is a fantastic and very interesting subject. But sales in this day and age is much more the marketer's domain than it is the old school closer salesperson. You need to ask for the business. There are times when you need to ask for the business, but nobody wants to be pushed into a sale, they want to be helped into a sale. And so it's all about a soft touch. It's all about, piquing someone's interest. So typically what I'm doing on LinkedIn is I'm saying, what I do is I get leads on LinkedIn. Would that be useful? And therefore the kind of people that say, yeah, that's interesting, are probably people who are open to the idea of leads on LinkedIn. And it means I'm almost pre-qualifying out all the people who think, LinkedIn, my clients aren't on LinkedIn, I don't need to sell to these people. They aren't even persuaded that their clients are on LinkedIn. I'd much rather talk to, that sounds interesting. And so I'm crafting an opening message which gets responses from the people that I actually want to spend time talking to. So there's two there's two approaches here. You can be very open about what you're doing here, what you're trying to achieve, or you can be more subtle. So what I do on mine, because I'm actually doing 1,000,001 things, I'm not a full-time salesperson, I'm head of digital, so half my time is spent working out what the team does and working out what our computer systems do and making sure our processes are in place and dealing with our existing customers and all these other things. So while sales and growing the business is part of my responsibility, I only want to talk to people who actually want to talk about what I do. And so with my message, I'm very specific. I'm saying, I do lead gen on LinkedIn. Is that of interest? And so the kind of people that say yes to that are people who are interested in what I do. But I don't get as many connections because I'm deliberately sort of filtering out the connections that I don't want, which is people that are not interested in lead generation on LinkedIn. Whereas if you knew that you just wanted to build the biggest pool of accountants that you were connected to, you might take a different approach. You might take a much softer introductory message that isn't so obviously, this is what I do for accountants. It's a bit more gentle, and it's just saying, I see we network in the same places, shall we connect? Once you've got a connection, it's unless you do something really nasty, it's pretty hard to unconnect them. Generally, people don't bother. So you can take the right strategy that's right for you in the business. So if you want a small number of highly qualified leads, be direct in your opening gambit. If you want a large number of people who might become a lead in the fullness of time, assuming you engage with them, then take a looser approach. Hi Sally, I came across your profile and I saw that you're based in Shoreditch, because the business location or her location can actually be pulled into the message. You can do this through a variety of techniques. You can go and have a look at her profile and see where she's based. You can have a look at her company's profile and see where they're based. You can do further research and go to their website and find the person and personalise the message. We've done business with companies similar to XYZ. So again, how do you know what kind of business she is? Well, you go and have a look. The more you can make this a personal message, the more likelihood she's going to be impressed that it's actually a one-to-one message and not a, cut and paste to 1,000 people. So you've got to stay under 300 characters. That's the challenge. Lettercount.com counts the letters. It's useful. So I'm the founder and CEO of 3 businesses, 2 of which have achieved multiple 7-figure exits. Interested in building relationships with similar business leaders. Shall we connect? Any idea what they're selling? Pretty nebulous, isn't it? But they're a successful individual and they want to reach out to similar leaders. So you're being praised because you're clearly, by association, a similar business leader to this person. And so that actually gets a lot of yeses, because people are flattered that somebody as successful and dynamic as this individual wants to reach out to you. So that's an example of a very woolly one, which will get loads of connections. So if your goal is to build large numbers, then a little tiny bit of subtle flattery and having an impressive profile yourself does wonders. If you consider yourself a salesperson, change your job title, because nobody connects to salespeople. So there's an example of a very specific message. Not only am I saying what I do, I'm actually asking, can you put me in touch with this person if it's not you? So here's an example of a second one. Thank you for connecting. It's always nice to thank them because they've just connected to you. So as mentioned, I'd like to present blah, blah, blah. Do you have time for chat? Or can I send you some stuff? Now, interestingly, they may not realise that they've just shared with you even their mobile phone number sometimes and their email address. But there's nothing that breaks a relationship more than starting to immediately spam somebody that you've just connected to. So you can see here, we're asking for information. We only need the information if they want us to have it. So if you would like to receive the white paper, well, you're going to need to send me an email address to send the white paper to. If you don't want to receive the white paper, if you'd prefer a chat, then I don't need your email address, I need your mobile phone number so we can have a chat. But often when I'm doing those kind of calls, I don't even require your mobile phone number. I give you my mobile phone number, and there's something personal about a mobile phone number. So when I give you my mobile phone number, I'm saying to you, I'm an open and honest sort of person, and you can call me. You don't need to give me anything. You can call me at a time that's convenient to you, and here is my mobile phone number. And so it's behaving like a human being. The more you can behave like a human being, the more the human being on the receiving end of this will actually respond in a human sort of way. You have to remember that most of us are really good at what we do, and so we shouldn't be embarrassed about telling people what we do, especially if we've handpicked the kind of people that need what we do. And if you've done your search right, then these are the only people you'll be talking to. So this should work, and in my experience it does. So once they've got your connections, you can view stuff. So if you connect with Richard Woods, I've deliberately not published all of his personal details all over the web, but if you connect with Richard Woods, he will connect with you and you will have access to all of his contact records because he makes that information public. Because in his space, he wants people to be able to talk to him. So people will do that. Less and less will you get this kind of information. If you go back a year, before all of that Facebook stuff, LinkedIn was throwing everything out the door by default. You used to be able to run a report and download all contact information from all of your contacts. You can't do that anymore. Or you can, but you only get the data that people have explicitly shared. So, which I guess is a good thing if you're not a salesperson. So, your prospect probably signed up to LinkedIn way before their current position. So the email is probably not the right email to use. So even if they do share it with you, you probably shouldn't use it unless you're sure it's the right one. They're probably blissfully unaware that they're sharing this kind of data. Most people have never looked really in the settings. And so maybe 10 years ago, they set the settings and they've never looked back. It was explicitly set to share stuff, and it still is. So, but they will probably take offence. They probably say, you've been stalking me. We've had people that have said, how did you get my contact details? Well, when you said yes to the connection, you gave them to me, you know. But anyway, that's why you don't want to fall out with somebody that you're hoping to have a relationship with, you know. And these simple little ways of behaving, you'll fall out with people. Not everyone, but a percentage. Other things to consider. Can you cope with the leads? So this approach will get you leads. It's a complete waste of time doing it. This takes time to do. It's a complete waste of time doing it if you don't even have the time to follow up on the leads. So we have clients that pay us to do this, and the reason they pay us to do this is two reasons. You've got all the information you need to just do this yourself. One, it will take you time. Two, it is mind-numbingly dull. And so if you're the kind of gregarious business owner, entrepreneur, salesperson-y type person that likes having one-to-one relationships, telephone calls, face-to-face meetings, all that kind of stuff, this is not your comfort zone. This is cut, paste, rinse, repeat, send. Cut, paste, rinse, repeat, send. Do that 50 times, go home, come in tomorrow, do it again. And so one of the reasons we get hired is because that is a dull service to do. The other reason we get hired is that actually a business owner, it's actually way below their pay grade. So it's a service that you can work out some way of getting done for you, but you're now paying money. You're now paying money out of your business. And so what we do is we give the leads that come in to the business owner or the salesperson. And if the salesperson does nothing with them for 10 days because they were off at an event or they just haven't got around to it because they've been flat out on this proposal for XYZ, what a waste of money, what a waste of time. You're burning your market. You know, there are only a certain number of people that are your market. You only get one shot at it. Time kills leads. So don't approach people until you're ready to talk to people. And if you've started the process of getting people to talk to you, you need to go the whole hog and finish the process. Otherwise, you probably won't get them warmed up again. So that's my piece of caution. So it takes time, it takes commitment. Most marketing does take time. It's a bit like, you know, where people say that SEO is free traffic. We both know that it just isn't. It's just not free. It's just, in some ways, it's harder traffic than PPC traffic. PPC traffic, we all know it costs. We know how much it costs per click. But SEO traffic is vast quantities of time engaging, analysing and writing thoroughly engaging content. So that's what you pay for the traffic. In this, you pay in terms of a repetitive process that you have to do and a little bit of money to LinkedIn to get the Sales Navigator. If you want to take the posting route, you pay because you've got to write a lot of engaging content. If you really were going for it, if you had a business that was larger, I think it'd be really hard to do this as a one-person band, to do all of this and all of that post-engagement stuff. But if you were a 2, 3, 4-person band, then you could probably take both of those strategies in parallel, and that would be the ideal, because you're building an audience, you're building a connection pool. If you do that for 6 months, you will have added 500 or 600 of your prospects onto your LinkedIn account. And then you've got a strategy for putting engaging content out for those people. And that would be the ideal world. And in our business, that's the approach that we take. But if you're going to do one or other, I think the easier one of the two is to connect to the strangers, because the intellectual process is crafting that great engagement, but you only have to do that once. Whereas if you're going to go down the posting route, you're going to have to craft engaging content every day. That's hard work. So I think we're getting close. Don't get yourself banned. It's against the law to, not LinkedIn law, to allow somebody else to log in as you. So you might have a VA. You could get the VA to do some of this work, but you are breaking the LinkedIn set of rules. Now, you're not breaking the law, you're literally just breaking the LinkedIn T's and C's. But LinkedIn can control access to their platform, and they can switch you off. And I know one or two, generally they are salespeople, who have just been overly zealous with their own accounts, and they've had to create new accounts because they've had the existing one killed. So, and technically you're not supposed to have more than one account, so that's in breach as well. You're not allowed to have fake accounts, so that's in breach as well. So you've got to take a line and you've got to draw your own conclusions about what you do with that. Interestingly, it has been shown that LinkedIn are not allowed to stop automated access to their publicly available data. So it's a court case that has been found that LinkedIn lost the case, which is a shame for them, but it's good for all of us marketers. So if you are going to be tempted to automate, there are loads of cheap tools out there that will allow you to automate the process. But 100%, all of the cheap ones that I've found make a fundamental error, which is that they use what's called a Chrome extension. And if you know your coding, Chrome extensions are detectable via JavaScript. Therefore, do we think that LinkedIn, who is owned by Microsoft, have enough clever developers to work out how to do that? Given that even I know how to do it, you can be sure that LinkedIn know how to do that. And so these cheap tools, they talk a good game, but if you use them, you'll probably get, and I've seen the letters, you'll probably get an email from LinkedIn saying, you're using an automated tool, stop it or we'll switch your account off. You've got two choices there. If you are going to go down the automated route, there are some much more expensive tools, and what they do is they use a remote desktop and they simulate a human being interacting with LinkedIn, which makes it very difficult for LinkedIn to detect that it is not a human being. One clear sign that it's not a human being is if you allow that tool to run and it's running from Hamburg in Germany and you're currently on holiday in Trinidad and you've left your computer logged in Glasgow because you were up visiting your mum, and you've got an iPad that your son is using in London, and they're all busily attacking your account at exactly the same time, that's a sign to LinkedIn that something weird's going on, and they'll just suspend your account. So if you are going to go down the route of automation, there are tools you can use. You can set up what's called a VPN and a proxy. So what you can do is you can have a way of simulating it so that when you're in Trinidad, it looks like you're in London. And if your office is normally in London, then the connection is, you can use the same thing when you are in London and anywhere. It will always seem like you're connecting from the same place. So that will be a sensible thing to do if you're going down this route. Proxies aren't very expensive. $5 a month or something like that will get you a proxy. So, sponsored email we talked about earlier on. It's similar to this connection stuff, only there are no limits on how many people you reach, and there are no worries about getting blocked on your LinkedIn account because you're paying LinkedIn for the privilege. So these are the examples of sponsored messages. I mean, I hope you don't mind the direct content. Personalisation, hi Jake, this came into my inbox. Reads like a nice email, nice opening email. The clue is that little grey bit above, sponsored. And some people hate sponsored stuff, and so you're going to lose a percentage of your audience just because they're stuffy about something like that. I don't mind it. So this guy Barry, I admire the fact that he's using one of these modern techniques to reach out to the people he wants to talk to. Good for him, well done. But he'll have to accept that there'll be one or two people that will just respond in a negative way because of this. One of our guys, he's running a successful business. It's not a huge business, but it is a successful, very profitable business. And he calls himself the CEO of the business. And so his opening message, I am the CEO of the business. This guy connected to him in order to laugh at the fact that he was calling himself a CEO instead of a managing director. I just thought, Jesus, what negativity. That you're wasting your life trying to impart your negativity on that person. But you will get this because you're talking to the great general public. And that, in terms of the bell curve, you'll get lovely people at this end and you'll get the opposite of lovely at that end. And you just have to deal with that. You're putting your head above the parapet and you're talking to strangers. I mean, if you think about it, this room is self-selected as being more likely to be full of nice people. Yeah? Because nice people come out to communities and engage with communities. Nasty people sit at home and whine and moan and send their negativity out electronically. It's the truth.
And if you've ever felt bad that somebody has said no via electronic means, I challenge you to go flyering in Edinburgh during the Edinburgh Fringe Festival and see what they say to you to your face when you're just trying to hand them a piece of paper.
Summary is no.
Sometimes it's no, sometimes it's not.
Yeah. So again, here's another example of a paid email, and you can see it says up there, LinkedIn offer. And she's making a little offer, and it's a copy of this Sophisticated Marketer Quarterly. Read now. Yeah, sounds all right. I'm a marketer. She's offering me some publication about marketing. Why would I moan about that? I'm sure some people do. So you get a campaign thing. This is, I won't go into detail here. You pay money to LinkedIn, you get to use their tools, you get to spend money on sending these things out the door. If this is appropriate to your business, then learn a bit more about it. It's not complicated stuff. It will just be unfamiliar when you first start, but you'll get better at it. So that's pretty much it. That's my 5 ways of connecting. There are probably other ways of using LinkedIn, but those are the 5 biggies. for me, I don't know what we'll do in this section after the break, but
I'll stand up now and tell you.
right. But I have got, just before, I've got some of these, which is basically what I think you should be trying to create is for your business. This is an example one. What are you going to do? It could be nothing, in which case this will be all blank. But you've got to decide an appropriate level of action. You've got to make a plan for it. I recommend you get a spreadsheet with each of the days of the week for the month, and I recommend you do what it is you think you should do.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Thank you.
Jake Liddell.